What is up, guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So, today we're going to discuss a very interesting article on Mr. Trump, and it was published both by Forbes and Investopedia. And here's the article. You can start reading this paragraph that starts with soon after. And basically, you remember the video I made about investing in index funds, right? So anyone who's a student, pupil, or disciple of Warren Buffett will tell you that if you're to take away just one thing, just one sentence from a 1 hour speech or 3 hours of him talking or all the annual meetings of Berkshire Hathaway, he said for the average Joe, you should just put your money in an index fund and forget about it because you'll get 10% returns. And what this article is basically saying is that his net worth at the time of the election was about 2.5 million. And back in 1987, his estimated real estate holdings were equivalent to 500 million. But if he had liquidated those holdings and invested them in the S&P 500, then he would be worth 13 billion. So you can imagine that. That's a very dramatic increase. 2.5 billion compared to 13 billion. I mean, that's crazy. Like, just imagine being $10 billion richer. Like, you already have 2.5 billion, but now you're worth 10 billion more. Like, you could literally set that money on fire every day and you'd never run out of warmth. Like, that is crazy. Like $10 billion. There's no limits to what you can do with that money. I'm sure you can buy like an airport with that kind of money. Wow. $10 billion. Personally, as I said, I would be satisfied at 4 billion. Like, if I ever made $4 billion in my life, I would stop caring about the money. Everything I would do after that point would purely just be because I want to. Like, maybe start a rock band, start a comic book, which would later turn into an animation. Yeah, those kind of things. Like, I would stop being the CEO of whatever company and I would just retire, hire a new guy that I've been grooming for the past 5 years and let him take over while I spend my money. Like, travel the world. Like, literally, I don't know if you've met those people who they've basically traveled to almost every country. I don't know if I need to travel to every country. I've already been to Australia. That's the only other country I've been to. I mean, I've been to either Dubai or Abu Dhabi, but that was a stopover, so I didn't even leave the airport. But yeah, there are a number of countries I would like to visit. Maybe at least 20 countries I would like to visit. So scrolling down further in this article, basically they say, so this part, uh, they basically say he would have made 26 times his money because the annualized rate of return was 12.3% from the period of 1987 to 2015. So 13 plus 15 is 28 years. So put away 500 million for 28 years without any further deposits and with a rate of 12.3%, you get around 13 billion. And let's actually test this out with a handy dandy NerdWallet compound calculator. So here we are. Unfortunately, this is a compound interest calculator. Unfortunately, it doesn't go up to 500 million. So I've put 500,000. So the amount that we get in the final balance, we will have to multiply it by. So the initial deposit or the principal, 500,000, or rather in our heads, 500 million, time span 28 years, estimated return 12.3%, compounding annually, right? Annually, not monthly. So as you see, that is 12 12 million, which in our head is 12 billion, because you multiply 12 by 100, it's going to be times 10 first, it's going to be 120, then 100, it's going to be 1200. So you get 12 billion. So that's correct by the estimates. The math is not wrong. And this chart is very beautiful. You can see the principal is very low, but by the more you go into the future, the interest is really, really high. So what about us as the average Joe? Can we actually pull this off? Well, the bad news is that if you wanted to make $1 billion now, today, starting today and 28 years into the future, you would need a lot of money in order to be able to do that. And the reason I say that is because let's say you took $1 million as your initial deposit. So just so you see the zeros, yeah, 3 zeros before and after the cursor. And that was your initial principal. And your contributions monthly were going to be 500,000, right? Then, as you can see, if you had the same rate of return, yes, you would actually have $1.2 billion. But here comes the problem. $1 million plus the 500,000 every month is going to equate to 6 million a year, right? So let's stop there. 6 million a year. Can you actually afford to invest 6 million a year into an index fund, a fund which you are not going to touch at all? Like 6 million a year. You'd have to be making 7 to 10 million a year. Like, you'd already be pretty rich to begin with. So essentially, 6 million a year, and you multiply that by the 30 years, for example, we're going to use 30 years in the calculation, and you would get 169 million, 100 million. Let me just put 100 million. So for simplicity of calculation, this is the investment we're doing. It's the same thing. It's just instead of 28 years, I put 30 years. So it's going to be 1.5 billion, because you want to keep up with inflation. Like, inflation in 30 years is going to be crazy, right? We can calculate that separately, but for the next calculation, I simplified it by making it 30 years. So you're basically investing. Actually, let's just keep it at 28 years because I don't think inflation will be that high. So at 28 years, you get 1.2 billion. And that means 6 million times 28 years, you get 168 million plus the initial 1 million which you put in. So that is 169 $169 million. So yeah, 169 million, $169 million. So the reason the rate of return doesn't seem the same, because that's a 10x return, whereas Trump's was like a 25 times return, is because we're not investing all of the principal at once, because no one has obviously if you invested the 169 million at once, then yeah, you'd receive better returns. But the idea is that we're not that rich. We will somehow manage to get 6 million a year that we can invest into an index fund that we won't touch. Now, here's the thing. What if instead you took that 60 million, right? And you decided you're going to invest a maximum of $50,000 in startups with that 60 million. That is 120 startups, right? So you decide you will invest in 120 startups, dividing your 6 million every year. And 120 startups multiplied by 28 years equals 3,360 startups. So over that span of 28 years, you'd have over 3,000 startups. And Forbes has this article that says 90% of startups fail. Here's what you need to know about the 10%. So even with a 90% failure rate, over the span of your 28 years of investing, 336 startups should succeed if we're just going based on the numbers. So 336 startups. So the real question is, would you rather invest? Like, we know that for Donald Trump, if he liquidated his money, it would have been better. Instead of holding real estate, it would have been better if he invested it in a stock market. But my question is, instead of investing in the stock market, would it have been better if he was an angel investor? And given Donald Trump was a rich man very early on, he could have invested in the .com before the .com bubble or the .com crash or the .com bust. And again, if he's using this strategy, one of those companies he could have invested in could have been Amazon, because he would have had the money by that time. He could have invested in Amazon, could have invested in Facebook, in Tesla, in PayPal, in all these companies you see that were made after 1987. So, in other words, so in other words, I think that's a pretty high chance of success, because only, like, with 336, you'd only need a few of them. Like, a few of them would need to reach a very high valuation for you to make your money back. And if you're investing in really the startup before it's even had an IPO, then definitely your returns are going to be higher than the people who invest after the IPO. So yeah, maybe you guys can answer in the comments what you think would be better in terms of investing. Do you think someone should be an angel investor? Or do you think someone should invest in stocks? This is obviously under the assumption if you're a really rich person. And in my next video, I'll talk about what angel investors can normally expect as a return for their investment, as well as the success rate. Because, it's one thing for businesses to succeed or fail, right, in terms of starting them up. But angel investors normally have a method, right? A method which they use to select business. So, for example, one reason many businesses fail is they don't have the right product market fit and they don't have enough traction. But as an angel investor, you can wait until the companies have traction. You can wait until you see that they have a good product market fit. So, and you also have a lot of business experience, right? And you also have the decision to say no to a lot of businesses. So who knows, maybe the rate is more like 50% of businesses fail for angel investors. But yeah, I'll discuss that more in the next video. Hopefully this one was short enough for you guys.